My girlfriend took our son to see my abusive parents behind my back for months and kept it a secret. When I found out, she said I was overreacting. Hey there, welcome to today's story. What are you up to right now? Get comfortable because this is one you'll want to hear. Today's story centers around a person dealing with a tough situation that I'm sure many of you can relate to. Have you ever had a time where you felt completely betrayed by someone you trusted? Or maybe you've had to make a tough decision to protect your loved ones from something dangerous. Well, in today's story, that's exactly what the main character is facing. Stick around till the end to see how they navigate through all the chaos and come out on the other side. And by the way, if you enjoy stories like this, please help me reach 1,000 subscribers soon so I can keep bringing more content like this. Thank you so much for your support. I never imagined I'd be the guy telling a story like this. Here I am, putting my life and emotions into words for the first time, hoping someone out there will understand the chaos brewing inside me. I've been sitting on this for days, wondering how to even start. It's not easy opening up, but I can't hold this in anymore. My heart's in pieces and I need to get this off my chest. This story is raw, and it's real, and I need someone to hear it. Let me start by telling you about my upbringing. I'm Ben, 25 years old, and I didn't have the typical childhood most people had. My father was a nightmare, plain and simple. One minute he'd be sitting on the couch, watching TV, looking like any regular guy. But in the next instant he'd explode. Throwing things, yelling, making the entire house feel like it was about to collapse. There was no warning. We never knew what would set him off, but when it happened, you could almost taste the tension in the air. And my mother? She wasn't any better. She was cold, calculating, manipulative. She never stood up to my dad, never did anything to protect me or my siblings. Instead, she played mind games with us, making us feel worthless, pit against each other, and always in a constant state of fear. The worst part? She always covered for him. It was as if she was more loyal to the chaos than to her own children. I left home when I turned 18. I had no plan, no idea where I was going, but I knew I had to get out. I crashed at a friend's place, got a job, eventually found a place of my own. It wasn't easy, but it was freedom. The pain of my childhood never really went away, though. It's something I carry with me every single day. A few years after I moved out, I met Mia. She was 23, beautiful, kind, and completely unlike anyone I'd ever known. She had this effortless energy about her, something that made the world seem a little less heavy. We started off casual, just two people hanging out, having fun, and not thinking too much about the future. We weren't trying to change our lives. We were just living in the moment, not expecting anything serious. But you know how life goes, things don't always stay simple. It happened unexpectedly. Mia got pregnant. We weren't planning for it. Honestly, the thought of becoming a father hadn't even crossed my mind, not in a million years. But when the test came back positive, we had to face the reality. And as you might expect, the next few weeks were filled with a lot of uncertainty, confusion, and doubt. We were both young, trying to figure out what we wanted in life, but we also knew one thing: this was happening. And we needed to make a decision. Mia was the one who made it clear that we were going to keep the baby. She was calm about it, level-headed, unlike how I was feeling, nervous, terrified, and unsure. But Mia had always been strong in ways I admired. She never seemed to second-guess herself. For me, the idea of becoming a father was overwhelming. I wasn't sure I even had the emotional foundation to be a good one, especially with the baggage I carried from my childhood. But the moment I saw the way Mia held her ground, I knew I had to step up. When our son, Leo, was born, everything shifted. It was no longer just about me and Mia. It was about him, about keeping him safe, about making sure he never had to go through the things I had experienced as a kid. I was determined. I would not let Leo grow up in the same kind of chaos and dysfunction I had. I knew that I had to create a better world for him. The stakes were higher now, and that meant I had to be the kind of man who could give him what I didn't have: safety, stability, and peace of mind. But in order to protect him, I had to make some difficult choices. One of the first decisions I made was that my parents were off limits. I knew I couldn't let Leo anywhere near them, not after everything I'd been through with them. The idea of having my son near those toxic people, the people who were supposed to love me and protect me but instead caused me so much pain, was simply out of the question. I didn't care what Mia thought about it. I wasn't going to let my son be exposed to the same nightmare I had grown up in. The things I had gone through with my parents were not the kind of things I could easily forget, and I didn't expect Mia to fully understand, not yet anyway. But I told her everything I could without overloading her with the darkest parts of my past. I needed her to understand why this was non-negotiable. I told her about the violence, the times my dad would snap without warning. I shared the memory of how, when I was just a kid, my dad once threw a glass bottle at me because I didn't hear him call my name. It missed, but the glass shattered on the wall, and a shard cut my arm. The scar was still there, a constant reminder of the unpredictability and fear I'd lived with. I told her about how my mom wasn't any better. While my dad was physically abusive, my mom was emotionally manipulative. She would lock me and my sister in rooms for days, just punishing us for whatever little mistake we made. We were given only water and a bucket to use as a toilet if we misbehaved. It was cruel, and it scarred me in ways that I still carry with me. I wanted Mia to understand the weight of what I was saying, but I didn't want her to feel overwhelmed by it. I showed her the scar on my arm, the physical proof of my pain, but even that felt like it didn't capture the full depth of the trauma. Mia listened. She didn't argue, at least not then. She seemed to understand, or at least she pretended to. She nodded, her face a mixture of concern and compassion. She didn't push back or question me, which, looking back, I guess should have been comforting. But I never knew if it was because she truly understood or if she was just being kind in the moment, trying to support me. I wanted to believe she got it. But something in the back of my mind kept whispering that maybe she didn't. Maybe no one ever could. Still, I thought Mia was different. I thought she would understand. I thought she'd respect my boundaries, respect how serious I was about keeping Leo away from my parents. I was so convinced she would, and for a while it seemed like we were on the same page. But as time passed, I started noticing small things. Little comments here and there, subtle shifts in her attitude. She never came out and questioned my decision outright. But I could see the hesitation in her eyes. And that hesitation grew with time. I started to sense that Mia was beginning to feel torn. She wanted to be supportive of me. But I could tell she also felt like I was holding something back. She didn't understand the extent of my pain, and no matter how much I explained it to her, she never seemed to fully grasp just how damaging my parents were. And then there were the times when I caught her talking about them just in passing. I remember one evening, after Leo had gone to bed, Mia and I were sitting on the couch watching TV when she casually mentioned how my mom had called her the other day to ask about Leo. I froze. She didn't see the look on my face, but I could feel my blood pressure rise. I told her Leo's doing great, Mia said, her voice light, and she said she's really excited to meet him one day. Maybe we could take him over to see them soon. I remember the way I snapped. I don't even know if I said anything at first, but my chest felt tight, and my mind was racing. What? I finally asked. My voice sharp. You didn't tell them about Leo, did you? She looked at me, startled. Then, what's the big deal? They're not bad people anymore. They just want to meet their grandson. I thought you'd be okay with that. I don't think they're dangerous. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Every word she said just chipped away at the fragile sense of control I had left. I had made it clear to her that my parents weren't safe, that I'd spent years trying to protect myself from them. How could she just casually suggest letting them meet Leo? The argument that followed was heated. I tried to keep my voice calm, but the frustration bubbled over. I explained to Mia again how deeply I felt about keeping Leo away from them. But she didn't seem to understand. Ben, you're still holding on to the past, she said, her voice soft but firm. They're different now. I know them better than you do. You don't get to make all the decisions here. Her words stung. I was angry. But deeper than that, I was hurt. It was as if she couldn't see the trauma I'd lived through. And it felt like she was undermining my sense of safety, our safety. I had made it clear that I was doing this to protect Leo, but somehow she was starting to side with them. I didn't want to think it, but I was beginning to wonder, was Mia starting to doubt me? And that was the moment I knew. I had to protect my son at all costs. Even if it meant fighting against the person I loved most in this world. The stakes had changed. Leo's safety had to come first. No matter what. Months went by and life settled into a routine. The chaos of the initial years was starting to settle down. We had a good system. I worked full-time and Mia worked part-time at a clothing store. We'd take turns watching Leo, making sure he was always cared for. Our families helped out too. Mia's parents would step in when we needed them, and my sister, Jenna, was always there when we had last-minute stuff to do. It was a system that worked for us, for the most part. But there was one thing I kept reinforcing, one boundary I couldn't cross. I made it clear again and again. No contact with my parents. I didn't want Leo exposed to them, not now, not ever. I felt like I was doing the right thing. I told Mia everything about them, about my dad, about how violent he was. How I had spent years trying to heal from the damage they caused. And Mia understood, or so I thought. She seemed to accept that my parents were a chapter in my past that had to stay there. And that was the deal. There were no gray areas in that rule. Then, one day, something strange happened. It felt like my whole world was being upended, and I had no control over it. I had just gotten home from work, the usual long shift, when I saw my phone buzzing with a message from Jenna. She was the only one in my family who seemed to get it. Who knew how bad things had been with our parents? The message was a picture, and when I opened it, my stomach dropped. My mind raced, and I felt a wave of nausea crash over me. There, in the background, was my parents' dog, and right next to it, Leo's sneakers. The flashing dinosaur sneakers I had bought him for his birthday. The ones I saw him wearing just that morning. My heart skipped a beat. I stared at the picture, trying to convince myself I was seeing things. Maybe it was some other kid's shoes. Maybe there was a mistake, some coincidence. But deep down, I knew. I could feel it in my bones. Something didn't sit right. I tried to talk myself down, thinking maybe Jenna was overreacting. But the fear in her text only made things worse. She had sent me the picture with a message asking if I knew what was going on. Her words were simple but chilling. Are you letting them see him? Please tell me you're not. I didn't know how to respond to her. How could I explain this? How could I tell her that Mia, the woman I loved, had crossed the one line I'd laid down? She knew how much I had suffered, and I made it clear that Leo wasn't going to be a part of that same pain. How could she, of all people, break my trust like this? I felt like I was suffocating. My heart was racing. The image in the picture wouldn't leave my mind. The shoes. The dog. The fact that my son, my little boy, was somewhere I swore he'd never be, around my parents, those people. I called Mia immediately. But she didn't pick up. Of course, she didn't. She was at work. I left her a voicemail, my voice shaking, but by the time she'd call back, I knew the damage would be done. I just had to wait. While my mind ran wild with questions. What had happened? How long had this been going on? Why was she doing this behind my back? 3 hours. 3 hours of me pacing around the apartment, trying to hold it together, my mind spiraling out of control. 3 hours where every possible scenario ran through my head. I was fighting the urge to call her again, but I knew it wouldn't help. I just had to wait. When Leo finally came home from daycare, I tried to keep it together. I didn't want to jump into anything to make him feel uncomfortable or scared. He was only 3, but kids notice everything. He walked in with his usual grin, happy from his day with his little friends. I forced a smile, trying to act like nothing was wrong. I made him a snack. Sitting next to him at the table, asking about his day. I didn't want to make him feel nervous. But then, out of nowhere, I casually asked, "Hey, buddy, do you know what grandparents are?" Leo looked up at me, his bright blue eyes sparkling, like I was asking him about something exciting. "Yeah, Mommy's mommy and daddy," he said, grinning. "And also Mommy's other mommy and daddy." That's when it hit me. The other mommy and daddy he was talking about? They were my parents. I didn't know what to say. I sat there, frozen. Leo had been visiting them, behind my back. My stomach twisted, a mix of anger and fear flooding through me all at once. How long had this been happening? Why didn't I know? And most of all, why hadn't Mia told me? My mind raced as I tried to hold it together. I looked at Leo, who was happily munching on his snack, oblivious to the chaos swirling inside me. I didn't want to scare him. Didn't want him to think something was wrong. But inside, I was spiraling. I pulled myself together long enough to ask more questions, just to get a sense of what had been going on. I didn't want to put pressure on him, but I needed to know. "Buddy," I said, my voice careful, "have you ever been to Grandma and Grandpa's house? When you went there, were you alone with them?" Leo's face lit up. "Yeah, Mommy takes me there," he said, and then, almost like it was nothing, he added, "Grandpa lets me play video games." I felt my heart drop into my stomach. Grandpa. My dad. The same man who had terrorized me as a child. The man I had fought my entire life to escape from. I didn't want to push Leo too far. He was just a kid. and I didn't want to make him feel like he was in trouble for something he didn't understand. But this was something I could never ignore. I told Leo to finish his snack, gave him a kiss on the forehead, and set him up in his room to watch TV. I had to process this. I needed time to think about what to do next, but I wasn't sure how much longer I could hold it in. The anger was bubbling up inside me, but I had to wait for Mia to come home. I needed answers. I needed to know why she had gone behind my back. Why she thought it was okay to put Leo in that situation. I was about to call her again, but then she finally texted back. "I'm on my way home. I'm sorry, I just got caught up at work. Let's talk when I get there." I put my phone down and stared at the screen. I was angry, hurt, and confused. But mostly, I just felt betrayed. How could Mia do this? How could she ignore the very real danger I had warned her about? I didn't know how to fix this. I didn't know how to make her understand that this wasn't just about me and my past. It was about Leo's safety, his future, and my responsibility as his father. I was about to find out if Mia still cared about that, or if she thought she knew better than me when it came to protecting our son. Knock knock. Now you're about to watch the best part of the story. But before that, make sure to subscribe to my channel so we can keep going together. I couldn't keep it together. My heart was pounding in my chest, each beat like a drum that only got louder the longer I sat there. My hands were shaking uncontrollably, and I could feel the cold sweat forming on the back of my neck. I was spiraling, but I had to act normal. I couldn't let Leo see me like this. He was too young to understand why his dad was freaking out, and I didn't want to scare him. He was still blissfully unaware of the storm that was brewing in our home. I looked at Leo, sitting on the couch, eyes glued to the TV. He was completely unaware of how his world was about to shift. It felt like a gut punch. This innocent little boy, the light of my life, and yet he was unknowingly caught up in something that could have been avoided. I tried to hold it in, taking a deep breath. I couldn't let my emotions control me. But the anger was building up like a wave ready to crash. My mind kept replaying the conversation with Leo. Yeah, mommy's mommy and daddy, and also mommy's other mommy and daddy. Those words echoed in my mind like a broken record, each repetition making me feel more and more like I was losing control. I had to know. I had to get the answers. "Have you been left alone with Grandpa?" I asked, my voice steady but filled with a tension I couldn't hide. Leo nodded, the innocence on his face making it worse. "Yeah. When Grandma and Mommy went to the store," he said, casually as if it was the most normal thing in the world. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, a combination of anger, betrayal, and fear. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about protecting Leo. My mind flashed to all the memories of my dad. The rage, the unpredictability, the fear I lived with as a kid. How could Mia not see this? How could she do this to him? I stood up, pacing in the living room, trying to control the whirlwind of emotions inside me. The anger was so intense, so raw, that it felt like it might swallow me whole. This was the same man who had tormented me, the same man I had spent my entire life trying to escape. The same man I would never ever allow near my son. How could Mia, how could she, of all people, put him in that position? I didn't even know how much time had passed. But when Mia finally walked through the door, I was a ticking time bomb. My fists clenched at my sides, my jaw tight, and my heart still racing. I was about to confront her, and I didn't know if I could keep my cool. I had to. I had no choice. But the words were already choking me. The storm inside was already raging, and I couldn't contain it anymore. "Mia," I said, my voice steady but edged with an intensity that wasn't there before. "Have you been taking Leo to see my parents?" Her face froze, like she'd seen a ghost. The color drained from her cheeks, and for a split second, I thought she might just collapse under the weight of what I had just asked. But instead, she quickly recovered, pulling herself together in a way that made my stomach twist with disgust. She got defensive. "Of course she did. You're overreacting," she said, almost too quickly. "They're not as bad as you think. Leo's fine." The words hit me like a slap to the face. Fine? How could she say that? How could she dismiss everything I had shared with her? Everything I had been through? My mind was spinning. I could feel my blood pressure rising, the heat flooding my face. My voice, once steady, cracked with frustration. "How could you do this?" I demanded, louder than I meant to. "How could you put our son in danger?" She took a step back, her eyes wide. And then she started to cry. I wanted to stop. I didn't want to be the guy who yelled, who made his partner cry. But it felt like everything I had been holding in for so long was finally breaking loose. Nothing happened, she sobbed, her voice breaking with the emotion that was clearly spilling over. They're not like what you say they are. They've changed, Ben. But I couldn't stop. They haven't changed, Mia, I shouted, my anger choking me. They've just gotten better at hiding who they really are. It was the truth. It was the cold, hard truth that Mia just wasn't willing to see. She didn't understand what I was trying to protect Leo from. I could see it in her face, she didn't get it. She didn't understand how deep my fear ran. How deeply I feared that my son might have to go through the same torment I did. And in that moment I realized she didn't truly understand me. Not the way I thought she did. Maybe I hadn't made myself clear enough. Or maybe she just didn't want to believe it. Mia wiped her eyes, sniffling, her face flushed from crying. She looked at me with a mix of confusion and hurt. And that just made everything worse. I just don't understand, Ben, she said, her voice trembling. You say you're protecting him, but what about his family? They're his grandparents. He deserves to know them. They've changed, I know they have. Changed? That word set something off inside me. It felt like a punch to the gut. The idea that she believed in their change. That she thought everything could just be swept under the rug because they'd cleaned up their act in front of her made me sick. I had lived through it. I knew better. No, Mia, I said, my voice low and firm, though the anger was still bubbling inside me. They didn't change. People like that don't change. They just learn to hide it better. And now you've put our son in the middle of it. Mia looked away from me, the tears still rolling down her cheeks. Killed me to see her like that. It killed me to know that she felt like I was accusing her of something so horrible. But I had to keep going. For Leo. You don't get it, Mia, I said, my voice softening just a little. But the hurt was still there. I told you what they were like. I told you about my childhood. I told you about the things my dad did. And I promised myself, I promised Leo, that he would never have to live through that. Mia's face twisted with frustration. But Ben, nothing happened. He's fine. You're being paranoid. They didn't hurt him. They were kind to him. He had fun with Grandpa. I stared at her, my eyes burning with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. You don't see it, do you? You don't see that it's not just about whether or not they've hurt him yet. I took a deep breath, trying to control the tremor in my voice. It's about keeping him away from that world altogether. I will never let him near the toxicity. And you went behind my back, Mia. You told him to keep it a secret. That's what predators do. That's what they did to me. And now you're doing the same thing to him. Mia's face crumpled. She sank down onto the couch, her hands trembling in her lap. I didn't mean to hurt you, she whispered through her tears. I thought I was doing what was best for him. I thought you would come around once you saw how happy he was. I never meant to hurt you. I stared at her, a coldness settling in my chest. It's too late for that, Mia, I said quietly, the words coming out sharper than I intended. I can't trust you anymore. Mia flinched like I had struck her. She looked at me, her eyes wide, but I couldn't soften it. I couldn't pull back from the truth. I didn't know where we went from here, but I knew one thing. I couldn't go on pretending everything was fine. The fight escalated so quickly, I hardly had time to process what was happening. My heart was racing, pounding in my chest like a drum. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. And all I could think about was Leo, how I had failed him. How everything I had worked so hard to protect him from was crumbling before my eyes. I called Mia's mother immediately, hoping that she would understand, hoping that maybe, just maybe, she could help calm the situation down. I told her what had happened, every word feeling like a gut punch as I spoke. The betrayal I felt from Mia, the helplessness in my chest, it was all spilling out. And yet, when her mother arrived, things took an even darker turn. I hadn't expected her to come over, let alone get involved so quickly. But once she was there, everything became a blur of heated words and rising tension. I told her, repeatedly, that Leo was not leaving with them. Not under any circumstances. I had already lost control once today, and I was not about to let it happen again. You're being too controlling, Ben, her mother snapped, her voice sharp. Like a whip crackling through the air. Mia is his mother too. She has every right to take him. The words stung. They hit me like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of me. I was a father, trying to protect my son from a world I knew too well. one full of manipulation, violence, and pain. How could she not see that? How could she just dismiss my fears like they didn't matter? But it wasn't just her mother I had to deal with, it was Mia too, standing there, silent and distant, as if everything we'd been through together meant nothing. I could feel my body tense, my chest tight with frustration. Why didn't anyone understand? Her mother continued to argue, her voice growing louder, more insistent. The frustration in her words felt like needles in my skin, each one pushing deeper. He's her child. You don't get to make all the decisions for him. This isn't just about you. And with that, everything broke. I snapped. I yelled at her, something I never do. I wasn't proud of it, but in that moment, it felt like the only way to make them understand, to make them see how much was at stake. How can you say that? How can you not see what's happening? I've been through hell with my parents, and now you want to take Leo back into that same world. Mia stood there, her face pale, her eyes wide. She didn't say anything, not right away. She just looked at me like she was searching for something, maybe an apology, maybe an explanation. But there was nothing to apologize for. I wasn't wrong. And I wasn't the one making irrational decisions. I was trying to protect our son. The words between us grew more frantic, more hurtful. The truth was that Mia wasn't just my partner anymore. She was the person standing in the way of my most important responsibility, keeping Leo safe. And as the argument escalated, I realized that no matter how hard I tried, no matter how much I begged for her to understand, she was never going to see it the way I did. The rift between us was too deep, too wide. There was no bridge to cross anymore. I'm not trying to control you, I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to stay calm. I'm trying to keep our son safe. That's all this is. You don't know what they can do. You don't know what they have done. And you just let them take him. You think it's okay, but it's not. Mia's eyes welled with tears. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I could see her struggle, but the longer the silence stretched, the more I felt my world unravel. She wasn't even fighting for Leo. She wasn't fighting for us. She wasn't fighting for anything. Nothing happened, Ben, she finally whispered through her tears. They're not like you say they are. They're not monsters. They changed. The last word hit me like a slap in the face. Changed? How could she say that? How could she truly believe it after everything? Mia didn't understand the danger. She couldn't see the scars, the memories, the trauma that had shaped me into the father I was. She couldn't see how close we were to losing everything, all because she thought she could give my parents another chance. They haven't changed, Mia. They've just learned to hide it better, I said, my voice cold with finality. You don't see it, but I do. And I will not let them get near Leo. Not ever again. And that's when she snapped. Her face twisted in disbelief, the hurt and anger mixing together in a cocktail of emotions I didn't know how to untangle. You don't trust me, she said, her voice trembling with frustration. You never trust me. You just think I'm the enemy, and I can't keep doing this, Ben. I can't live with someone who doesn't trust me to make decisions for our son. She didn't even wait for me to respond. Before I could even comprehend what was happening, she turned and grabbed her things. I'm taking him, she said, her voice sharp, and the finality in her words crushed me. I need space. We need space. Leo's coming with me. I didn't stop her. Couldn't. In a way, I felt like I had already lost her. In the midst of the fight, in the middle of the chaos, Mia walked out of the house with Leo in tow. I didn't know if I would ever see them again. I stood there in the silence of our empty house, feeling the weight of everything that had just transpired. It was as though a cold wind swept through the rooms, chilling me to the bone. The echoes of our argument still hung in the air. And for the first time, I realized just how far we had fallen. How had things come to this? How had the woman I loved, the woman who was supposed to understand me the most, betrayed me like this? I wanted to scream, to collapse in frustration, but I couldn't. The silence around me was deafening. The house, once full of laughter, now felt like a tomb, a symbol of everything I had lost. The dreams of a happy family, those dreams had shattered, and I had no idea how to put them back together. My heart was broken. I didn't just lose Mia. I lost my son, my baby boy, the one I had sworn to protect from the very things that had nearly destroyed me. I had tried so hard to shield him from it all, but I hadn't succeeded. I felt like I had failed him in the most fundamental way. I wanted to protect Leo. I wanted to make everything right, But now I didn't know how. I didn't know how to fix this. Mia had gone. And with her went my hope that we could somehow move past this. How could I make her understand? How could I make her realize that she had put Leo in harm's way? I sat in the darkness, the reality of the situation setting in. There was no easy solution. There was no quick fix. All I had now was the weight of my actions, the fear for Leo's safety. And a house that felt emptier than it ever had before. Mia came back the next day, but things were different. The air between us was thick with unspoken words. And the tension felt like it could snap at any moment. We barely spoke. It was as if the room itself was suffocating under the weight of everything that had happened. Her presence wasn't comforting like it used to be. Instead, it was a constant reminder of the distance that had grown between us. She seemed distant, almost like she was physically present but emotionally miles away. I tried to make sense of it, but every time I looked at her, all I could see was the betrayal. There was too much between us now. Too many unspoken truths. Too many lies. My world had shattered, and I didn't know how to pick up the pieces. I loved her, or at least I thought I did. But love didn't erase what she had done. Trust had been broken in a way I couldn't ignore. A crack so deep that I couldn't see how it could ever be mended. The silence between us was louder than any argument we'd ever had. It was suffocating. I could feel the weight of her presence, but it only made me feel lonelier. I kept replaying everything that had happened, the betrayal, the lies, the fight. Each time, the anger swelled up inside me like a tidal wave. But then came the ache, the hurt that I had been trying to suppress, the heartbreak that kept gnawing at me. I wanted to scream, to shake her and demand an explanation, but I knew it wouldn't help. The damage had been done. I kept asking myself, where do we go from here? How could I move forward when everything felt like it had come to a screeching halt? I didn't even know if I could forgive her. She went behind my back, and in doing so, she put Leo in danger. That was something I couldn't just overlook. Not now, not ever. How could she not see that? How could she think it was okay to bring our son into that environment? I thought about the fight, the argument that had changed everything. Mia had always been someone I could talk to, someone who understood me. At least I thought she did. But now it felt like she was a stranger to me. She hadn't just lied to me. She'd betrayed the very trust that had held us together. And I couldn't figure out how to fix it, how to get back to a place where we could even talk about what happened. It was like we were speaking two different languages. She was looking at it from her perspective, but I was seeing everything through the lens of my past. My trauma, my fear of my parents. I didn't know if I could ever trust her again. I didn't know if I could ever look at her the same way. The weight of it all pressed down on me. The thought of Leo, innocent and unaware, caught in the middle of our mess made my heart ache. I couldn't shake the image of him, my son, walking into my parents' house, not knowing the danger he was walking into. I couldn't let that happen again. I spent the next few days in a haze. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel anymore. Every time I looked at Mia, I felt both love and betrayal, an emotional tug-of-war that left me exhausted. I found myself turning to my sister, Jenna, more than ever. She was the only one who seemed to understand what I was going through. Jenna knew what my parents were capable of, what they had done to me and my sister. She had seen it firsthand, the manipulation, the cruelty. She knew the depths of their darkness. And in that moment, she was the only one I could rely on. I found myself leaning on her more than I ever had before. Our conversations were raw, unfiltered. She was the only one who didn't judge me or make me feel like I was overreacting. She got it. "You're not crazy, Ben," she said one night after I had poured out everything I was feeling. "I know how bad they can be. I know you're doing what you think is best for Leo. But you also have to figure out how to move forward. You can't keep living in this anger. It's eating you alive." Her words hit me hard. Jenna was right, but it was easier said than done. How could I move on from this? How could I forgive Mia when she had made such a massive mistake? When she had betrayed my trust so deeply? I wasn't sure I could. But I also knew I couldn't keep living in this limbo of resentment and confusion. It wasn't good for me, and it certainly wasn't good for Leo. In the days that followed, I thought about getting legal help. I thought about what it would take to protect Leo, to make sure he never went back to my parents' house. The thought of them being anywhere near him made my stomach turn. I had tried to protect him from all of this, but now I realized it wasn't just about keeping him away from my parents. It was about keeping him safe from Mia's decisions too. I contacted a lawyer, trying to figure out what my options were. The legal route was complicated, though. The system didn't always favor the father, especially when Mia had as much support as she did. She had her family behind her, and that made everything more difficult. I didn't know if I could win this battle. The thought of losing Leo, of not being able to protect him the way I needed to, was almost too much to bear. But then I thought about what Jenna had said, and I knew she was right. I couldn't let this go. I couldn't just stand by and let everything slip away. I had to fight. I had to fight for my son, for his safety, for his future. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know how long this battle would last or how things would turn out with Mia. The pain of everything that had happened was still fresh, and I couldn't pretend it was all going to be okay. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I would fight for Leo. No matter what, Mia and I would have to find our way through this, if it was even possible. But right now, my priority was clear. I couldn't let my son be caught in the crossfire of our broken relationship. I had to be his protector, and I wasn't going to let anyone, not even Mia, take that away from me. What do you think about the story? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so don't forget to leave a comment with your feelings or any feedback you might have. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next one. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps me motivated to bring you more amazing stories. Thanks so much for sticking around and listening all the way through.